Hello, and welcome to Monumental, where we sit down with entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries, and big thinkers making monumental change. Here's your host, Evan Holiday.
Welcome to Monumental. I'm your host, Evan Holiday, and today we have on the show with us a good friend of mine, Abhi Goel. Abhi, great to have you on the show, man. How you doing?
Good, doing well. Great to be here, Evan.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. A quick little background for our listeners. Abhi and I are actually in the same mastermind, the Infinite 8 Mastermind together. It's a phenomenal group of driven, amazing guys. We're all pushing each other to be the best version of ourselves. So Abhi and myself and a few others, we really got to know each other the last few months. And it's been great to be a part of that group, especially going into what's going on right now with COVID-19. But before we get into the episode, I want to give you a little background on Abhi. He is an Atlanta-based tech entrepreneur who has founded 5 companies, including Axelerant, Cirracore, and Neutrino, with multiple successful divestitures. He is currently focused on advising tech startups in the metro Atlanta area as a business and growth strategy advisor and affordable workplace housing real estate investments. So Abhi, I'm really excited to have you on. Let's just dive right into a little bit of your background.
Yeah, great to be here, Evan. Thanks for having me on the show. So, I've lived in Atlanta pretty much my whole life. My folks moved to Atlanta from India back when I was very young, and I've grown up in Atlanta and seen sort of all of the growth here. I went to college to become a doctor, like most Indian folks do. However, my path sort of diverged from there, and I got a liking to technology. And I graduated with a computer science degree. I kind of had a stint working at some large consulting companies like Accenture and IBM, and I started my own software consulting business back in 2005. That was really kind of the time at which I began to sort of explore the whole sort of tech entrepreneurs, helping folks solve problems at a different sort of scale than folks were doing at Accenture and IBM. It was smaller scale, but it was super interesting problems. I started the business with my partner, who moved to India to basically help set up sort of an offshore operation, and we started to grow that business. And a lot of the folks that we were helping needed additional services around other technology needs that they had. And out of that company, Axelerant spun a couple of different other companies. One was in managed hosting and IT infrastructure. So whoever we built platforms for, or sites, or content management systems, they needed to host it somewhere. So we started a hosting business. A lot of folks that we were working with were in the online publishing space, so news and information. And the way they monetized was advertising, and they needed help with that. So started Neutrino, which is an advertising consulting business. As the other businesses grew, I sort of took a back seat in the consulting. My business partner in India still runs that business. We're just under about 100 folks, and that's running strong. I focused my attention on Cirracore, which is the hosting business, and we grew that from sort of a managed hosting platform that it started off to a cloud infrastructure as a service platform, not too dissimilar from AWS, very competitive, very early days. We went through lots of iterations of our cloud platform and grew that business until about 2017, where I sold it to a firm doing sort of a roll-up of similar businesses. In that interim, it was a very interesting run. Saw the writing on the wall, with Google getting into the business, Amazon, Microsoft with their Azure platform. We decided it was a good time to get out and take some money off the table there. And in the interim, I also had a digital advertising consulting business with Neutrino Media Group, and similar sort of story. We grew that. We were processing upwards of about 10 billion impressions a day at its peak. We exited that business in a strategic partnership with another advertising company where they took over the clients and kind of continued to run that. Once again, a very fast evolving landscape in digital advertising online. So felt like it was the right time to get out. In the interim, while I've done all of this, I've sort of built up my real estate portfolio. I kind of one of my philosophies is really around investing, is to basically where I invest most of my money in real estate where I have processes in place so that it runs without me, and it's more rental income producing real estate. So I try not to invest too many of my dollars that I earn back in the businesses that I'm spending my time. Instead, I like to put that money to work for me in real estate where it's appreciating, generating cash flow, and sort of following that model. So the money I made, I invest in real estate, and I continue to build that portfolio up now. And more recently, since selling Cirracore in 2017, I've been focused on advising startups here in the Metro Atlanta area, just on the technology vein with sort of software architecture, infrastructure, and more recently got back involved in all of that.
That's really, really interesting. And I love how it seems like as you're going on your journey, you're just learning new things, you're seeing a need, you're building a business for it, and then you're growing that business systematically, it sounds like, to a point where other people are interested in that business, and then you're able to sell that off at the right time and then move on to the next business. It's very fascinating. And as far as like that initial, when you decided I'm going to start, you worked for some of the bigger tech companies. What made you want to take that leap and start your own software consulting company?
It's funny you asked that. So I still remember the time. It was, back in 2005, I was working at Accenture, and I was thinking about going back to B school and going to the route of finance. And I didn't have any kids at the time. And, I was talking to my wife, and it was kind of a decision point. Do I start my own thing or do I go back to business school? And, I looked at what my lifestyle was like at the time. I was traveling, 30 to 45 weeks out of the year. And I kind of thought about it, and I was like, okay, if I go back to B school and I go down that route, chances are I will probably always be traveling. And as I thought forward about, having a family, having children, did I want to be the father on the road, or did I want to be someone that was at home? So that was kind of one of the reasons I got into sort of tech entrepreneurship. The other thing was actually something my father said when I was very young that's always stuck with me. He's like, you can either try your luck or you can sell your luck. And what he meant by that was basically you can go work for someone and sell your luck. So there'll be a day when you're lucky and they're going to reap the rewards from your luck to an extent. Or you can try your luck, go into business for yourself. So, you work hard, you do all the right things, and when your lucky day comes, you're the one that's going to reap the rewards from your efforts. So that kind of stuck with me. I don't agree with it 100%, but it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, I want to try my luck and see where it goes.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting first couple of years, just because by the time the rubber really met the road and we had a good cadre of clients, 2008 hit, and it was just like everything grinded to a halt.
Yeah.
And but we made it through, and it was good times. It was a good period of time to be an entrepreneur. It really let me focus on eliminating waste and making sure we were running an efficient ship, as opposed to growing haphazardly, or when when things are plentiful, you waste a lot.
Yeah. I think, and we talked about this in the mastermind, like we're definitely going through that now where everybody's, double or triple going through everything, that where they're spending money, where they're allocating resources, and being more mindful and being more resourceful with the limited resources that they do have. So it does definitely like kind of sharpens the saw a little bit as far as, your mind and how you think about things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going from that initial company, as far as you're taking that next step of growth and going through, at what point did you start the next company on top of that?
Sure. So early on, the other thing is my philosophy, or one of my limiting beliefs is around fear of not making it, I guess you could say. And when I started this business, especially with 2008 coming around, I was always afraid I'm going to lose my clients. I'm going to have to shut down, go back to a job, and sort of have that big failure stamp on me, sort of thing. And so that drove me to always be hedging my bets, I guess you could say. So when I saw we were referring a ton of business out to large, managed hosting providers, and I was kind of like, oh, well, that would be a good recurring revenue model, because the business was very much based on projects. So if we landed a client, we got a big project, we were good for the next 2 to 3 months. We got a very big project, we were good for the next year. But I knew that project would come to an end. And as long as I didn't have a constant pipeline of more and more clients, my days were numbered. So here was this business model that I kept referring tons and tons of business out to for every client we had that was providing this other company recurring revenue, where they wouldn't leave unless you had some major issue, or you didn't meet their needs. So it became a natural fit. We got a couple of large opportunities that were large enough to where it supported us going out and renting data center space, buying some servers, hiring a couple of guys. And I was like, all right, let's roll the dice and see what happens. Similar to kind of how I started the original business. And we did that, and came to find that it's not quite so easy to run a hosting business. It's not as easy as you see on TV. So we had our hiccups and we had our hurdles, but the clients that we had, fortunately, because we were also providing them the sort of ongoing support and building their projects for them, they were willing to work with us, and we gave them a great price. So it let us cut our teeth on that, and I had a good couple of partners involved in that allowed us to sort of grow that business and scale that business. And that's what kind of let us get there.
That's interesting, and that makes me think of I've seen other companies successfully do this, and this is actually something we're implementing in Holiday Ventures. Is how can we, every aspect of the business, start off with 1 or 2 aspects and think about how can we provide that service to ourselves. And, same thing as you were doing, more or less, like you're seeing all this recurring revenue and this constant service that is needed by your clients and one other business, and finding a need and basically handing off clients to other companies and saying, hey, wait a second, we could do that too. And you may not know exactly what that path looks like at the beginning, but that's something, for Holiday Ventures, we're looking at, okay, well, how can we, create an architect company? How can we create a general contracting company? How can we, look at other aspects? We've even thought about like insurance, because, once you get up to a certain number of units, it makes a lot of sense to look at, because it's such an expense that your projects are carrying. But I think that's so fascinating when businesses are able to accomplish that. Instead of hiring out another group or handing off business to somebody else, see if there's a way that you can implement that as kind of an auxiliary business to service your own clients or your own business even.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very much a proponent of that kind of, there's definitely a lot of sort of vertical integration that I try to build into whatever business I'm doing. So if it's core competency, I will try to vertically integrate as much as possible, but I'll also think horizontal, like what are the complementary businesses and how can we capture
Yeah.
some of that? I think it's a fine line of spreading yourself too thin as well.
Yeah.
But I always, when I approach things like that, I try to keep in mind to, how can I partner with the right folks to accomplish
Right.
the horizontal piece as opposed to trying and doing it all myself, right? Because that's where, I may not have the expertise, but if I can find someone that has the expertise and that wants to get into this business, or get into business for themselves, then I find a good partnership and give it a shot, sort of thing, and I dip my toe in and let the business grow organically instead of trying to take a big splash in, spend a lot of money, and come to
Yeah.
find that it's a failure, right? It's very much organic. Well, and that's a good thing I forgot to mention is it's one of those things. All my businesses have been sort of grown organically. I haven't really gotten external funding for most of my projects. That's one of those things where on my next sort of list of agendas to get outside funding for the next project that I do. I'm working on one right now that I think is going to be a good candidate for that. But it's everything I've done up until now, I've grown organically.
So that you bring up a good point with the organic growth, and then also finding the right partners. And it sounds like you're saying like empowering them or finding the right partners that bring something to the table that complement what you bring to the table. So how have you been able to find those right partners for your previous businesses?
Yeah, it's not, it's not easy, and it's definitely been a lot of trial and error. It's really just, one, I think it just requires being honest with yourself, of what are my skill sets and what am I lacking, in order to pull this off. It's hard because I'm pretty hard headed from that perspective. I can figure anything out, or so I think. But it's one of those cases about being honest with yourself and saying, okay, well, yeah, I could figure it out, but where should I spend my time? Where do I need to spend my own resources, and where, what am I lacking to make this thing go? And it's not a case of what's everything that I'm lacking, but it's like, what are the one or two pieces that I'm lacking to get to that first step? And when I get to that first step, I don't necessarily need to know how the whole universe, that whole picture is going to play out. But at that point, I can figure out what the next step will be. So I'm very methodical around that. And that's where I spent a lot of my time, was just trying to figure out what's that first step? What's the right first step? And what do I need to get there? And when I get there, what's the right next step? And what do I need to get there? And that's kind of how I've always done it. And, it's worked out well so far.
Yeah. And that's something talk about quite frequently, is the next logical step. And sometimes we always get bogged down with, we're like, oh, there's a million things we need to do. And reality, there's really just one thing you need to be doing. And then you do the next thing. And then you do, it's that next logical step. And if you think too far ahead, you're going to bog yourself down mentally.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I say that it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
I find myself thinking 5 steps at a time, and it's always like, okay, I got to back myself up, be like, okay, what do I need to do today instead of what do I need to do now?
And also the part about like finding others to partner with, I think that also brings up, like, I think some entrepreneurs, when they're getting started, they're under the mindset of, I need to do all this on my own, or I need to bootstrap it. I need to, I need to wear all the hats. And I think that's true to a degree, especially when you're starting a new venture and you're wanting to grow it organically. But I definitely think there's value and merit in saying, okay, well, what am I really just not good at, or what is not a good use of my time? What can I outsource? What can I delegate? What can I find in a ideal partner?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't think I wasn't always that way, and it required a major transformation for me, because, as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest things was, fear of failure, right? So I was going to do everything I could to not fail,
Yeah.
right? Not appear like I feel. So my friends wouldn't look at me and laugh, or my parents aren't disappointed, or my wife doesn't say, "Oh, you should have gone to business school." Like, that's how I started off, right? But
Yeah.
it was when I embraced failure and sort of failing fast and saying, okay, I can get up from a failure and I can do the right thing. I'm never going to do the right thing every time, all the time. So it's better that I fail, recognize that failure, get up and try something else. And that's kind of been my sort of philosophy in terms of everything I do. I expect everything I do will have failure, but it's being able to recognize that failure and make a change, instead of being hard-headed and sticking with it. Right. I've pivoted every business I've had. I've pivoted, multiple times, more times than I'd like to admit.
So what about, speaking of which, what about, like, as far as examples of past failures or difficult situations that you learned from? Is there anything you can share there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I still remember back to about 2000, 2012, 2013 timeframe, where I was involved heavily in Axelerant. That was my software consulting business, and we had Cirracore up and running, which was the managed hosting business. And we were also doing the digital advertising business. So I had three things going on, and I had partners that were, helping me with all three of those. And so I would wake up in the morning and I would focus, I would divide my time pretty well between the digital advertising business and the hosting business. I would work there during the day. And, at night I would get on, because Axelerant was primarily based over in India. I'd get on at night and I'd work till 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. And this was my life for a couple of years. And I was finding myself burnt out. My wife's not happy. I've got, in 2012, 13, I've got a 2-year-old son. And I'm thinking, like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I'm working so hard, but I could not get myself to say no. Right. I mean, I felt like I was going to be a failure. I was going to let my business partners down. So I always had to say yes. Right. Whatever I needed to do, it was my responsibility. I'd started this business, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So one of the biggest, I'd say one of the biggest failures I had was always saying yes to all these sort of situations. And I ran myself into the ground. I was running the businesses at the time into the ground, just because as much as I like to think I can multitask, that's really not a thing. I didn't really have a lot of focus at the time. So, the day that I decided that I was going to let someone down and say, I can't do this anymore, was a big shift for me. Right. And I think it was a relief for the other folks involved as well. People are happy to hear no, but it aggravates the hell out of them if you say yes and you don't deliver, sort of thing. Yeah. So it was that shift that I figured out it's okay to say no. I can still have a good relationship. We can still be friends, business partners, etc. But I need to say what I can and can't do, instead of saying yes out of a necessity to please.
Yeah.
Because in the end, it doesn't please anyone.
Yeah, exactly. And it just, it causes undue stress and undue, negative damage to your relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a big realization. And it almost took me to the brink of, exhaustion and failure of everything I was doing.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And then I can also relate to what you said about your biggest fear is, not showing up as much as you think you could, or having that fear of failure. So I definitely resonate with a lot of what you're saying right now. And I agree. I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs, and then a lot of those in real estate and those driven people. It's in them to always do more, take on more projects, build more things, do more things. And I've definitely been a victim of that myself, where I'm just like, man, I could do it all. And then I realize I'm like, wait a second, I'm doing no good for anybody.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. I've gone through that where I'm like, okay, I need to say no more often. And I need to be clear and transparent with people and say, look, I'd love to do this, but not right now.
Yeah.
And this, I want to do you a service and me a service, and say no.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very important trait to develop. It's not easy, at least for some of us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes we nickname ourselves deal junkies.
Yeah.
It's hard to, it's hard to say no sometimes, but yeah, it's a habit that should definitely be formed. As far as where you're at now, advising entrepreneurs, advising companies in the tech space, what has that been like for you, and what have you learned from being in that advisor role?
Sure. So it was interesting after 2017 when I sold Cirracore. I was kind of like, okay, I never want to go back into technology again, because I had a run for 12 years, and starting from scratch, bootstrapping, just the sleepless nights. How am I going to make payroll? To are we going to lose this big client? I was like, okay, I've had enough. Like, I'm good. I'm just going to invest in real estate, and I'm going to find something else to do. But over time, I kind of found in talking to friends in the community, like just my network here locally, I did have a lot to offer in terms of my experience to folks that were getting started, or folks that were running and were sort of out of their depth in some of the things they were doing around technology. So I found advising to be sort of, it scratched my itch to kind of stay in technology and kind of stay current, but at the same time be able to help, but kind of hands off to an extent. That lasted a good year and a half, 2 years, before which I was like, okay, I need to get involved again. And so as a result, I've gotten back involved in a new venture that started recently. And but it was interesting to kind of see, how so consulting and sort of providing sort of an advisory service. It was interesting to see how founders and entrepreneurs and startup guys can get in their own way. And it gave me a mirror to reflect back upon when I was in that same position, how hard-headed I was in many respects, or just had tunnel vision to where I just needed someone to kind of say, hey, look over there, this is a much easier path, or have you thought about this? And early on, I was kind of the opinion, I've got to do it my way, kind of to the point we were talking about a little while ago, where you do need a set of advisors, you do need mentors and folks that you can go talk to and kind of bounce ideas off of. It's invaluable. And I think had I done that earlier on, or had I done that earlier on in my business, it would have been a different trajectory for sure.
Yeah, I 1000% agree with that. I think, having a coach in my life, and then now coaching others and mentoring others, and relying so heavily on my mentors, I've seen what an impact it's had on my thought process, the way I see the world, the way I see my business. And it's just amazing what a different perspective will give you. It kind of just like, light bulb will click when they say one little line. And, I think that's even happened sometimes in our mastermind calls.
Yeah.
It's like, you'll just have a little click and it'll be like, oh yeah, never thought about it that way. Or like, yeah, I'm thinking about my business all wrong. I need to be thinking about it this way.
Yeah.
So
and it's interesting because, I'd gone through, my own sort of journey. My mentors were a lot of books I read and folks in the industry that I looked up to, that I always went to. But it wasn't until I actually got out there and I started mentoring others that I realized my own sort of tunnel vision. I knew there were things I could have done better, but it didn't really hit home until I saw it firsthand, like trying to get through to someone else that's having a problem or an issue. So that was that was a great experience over the last couple of years, and something I've learned a tremendous amount from in terms of what I'll be able to apply for myself and, as I mentor and coach others.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I want to touch on a few things that you're a part of, and just talk about how you got involved, and then also what that means to you. So you're a board member with the Giving Back Fund, and then you're also a board member with Atlanta Beltline. I'd love to hear more about how that happened and what impact that's having on you and the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So, getting involved sort of charitably in sort of the nonprofit space was something I've always wanted to do, but I never really thought I had time for. I was always busy in my business, leading up to 2017. And then after that, I wanted to sort of diversify and didn't want to just get back into technology entrepreneurship and let that consume my life once again. So after that point, I was kind of like, okay, well, what's important to me? I want to spend more time with my family and kids. I want to take better care of my health. I want to pursue my sort of interests and hobbies. I want to help others in sort of what I know professionally. And then I want to give back in some way. So that was kind of the giving back is really how I got involved with a couple of these boards. So Atlanta Beltline, it was sort of a crossover in terms of my interest in real estate and sort of the growing Metro Atlanta area. The Atlanta Beltline's one of the largest actually projects in the U.S. That's a revitalization effort. It's 33 miles of walkable trails that are connecting a lot of old sort of neighborhoods around Atlanta. It's the old sort of path for the trains that ran around Atlanta. So what they're doing is they built a concrete pathway that connects all of these neighborhoods so you can go walk. And as a result, there's a spur of business, residential, and just a lot of revitalization. So I thought, I'm in real estate. I'd love to be able to help contribute to some of the revitalization that's happening around Atlanta and make sure that it's, not all business, but also sort of taking into consideration the local communities and the interests that they would have as well. So that's been extremely fulfilling just to be able to have my finger on the pulse, be able to be sort of that voice for the community within the Atlanta Beltline. And Giving Back Fund was, that came about, I joined the Atlanta Beltline board some time back, and then I was like, okay, well, I'm contributing a little bit of time, but I wanted to contribute some more. And I reached out to a friend of mine, Mark Pollock, who's the director for Giving Back Fund. What they do is actually they help folks that want to set up a foundation essentially streamline that process. So being able to get the 501c3 status, the insurance requirements, the board requirements, the banking requirements, they sort of fulfill that for them, as well as an immense network for fundraising and things. So I thought, who better to go approach to find out what are some causes that that could use my assistance. When I reached out to him, he happened to be that he himself was looking for board members, and what really appealed to me there was that I could make an impact on many nonprofits as opposed to just one. So for example, with all this COVID stuff going on, there have been a flurry of new foundations, and I've gotten involved in a couple of really interesting projects through that with, helping source PPE and masks and gowns and all this sort of stuff for some charities that are, helping connect that supply with hospitals and retirement homes and nursing homes and folks that, are being essentially overlooked by the states, to another organization that's providing sort of video conferencing capabilities for like end of life related stuff. So, folks can't attend funerals because of COVID and, all of this sort of stuff. So they're providing iPads essentially to folks so that folks can attend sort of the funeral service and things like that.
Wow.
A lot of interesting little things that you just never even think of.
Yeah, that's amazing work.
Foundations around. And it's been interesting to sort of one, see and experience it, but two, provide sort of my own expertise where and when possible, to make an impact.
That's really, really cool work. Yeah, that really is that's definition of having a monumental impact. I appreciate you sharing that. And I love exactly what you said, like the Giving Back Fund. It gives you the opportunity to share with those groups. And then also you're kind of having a hand in a lot of different unique projects and helping be the catalyst for raising capital and funds for those good causes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it aligned with my approach of how I kind of approach everything. It's just like, okay, how can I make more of an impact? And this was a mechanism for me to make not a one-to-one, but a one-to-N sort of impact across charities who are all doing, they're trying to achieve the same sort of thing.
Can you describe, what does a one-to-N mean for our listeners?
Oh, sorry. So like, if I go cook a meal and I go deliver it to a homeless person, the way I look at it, it's a one-to-one. I've helped that person. But if I can help a charity that's going out and feeding hundreds, then I've made a sort of a one to, I say N, right? I've helped them make an impact on 100 people. But if I'm helping 100 charities that are all helping 100 people, then I've helped 10,000 people.
Yeah.
Right. So it's sort of an exponential sort of impact, and that's kind of how I have approached this whole thing: is how can I make a larger impact given my time. I certainly donate money to causes that I'm passionate about, but where I donate my time, I'd like to make a larger impact.
Yeah, I really like that. That's why I wanted to go into the definition of that, just because I think it's worth noting. Like, there's many different ways to give back, and I think there's value in all of them. But it's powerful when you can have that like tenfold effect on having an impact on others, whether it's education or impact or donation or charitable work. It's powerful.
No, it's great. It's been extremely fulfilling for me. And, it kind of goes back to a little bit about, I'd been working professionally and sort of my business interests, and that had gone well with the exit of Cirracore, for example. But I kind of was feeling unfulfilled, right? Then I spent time with my family, and a lot more time with my family and kids, and I was getting more fulfillment out of that. I felt like, okay, well, I've been neglecting myself, so I've been I started taking care of my health and pursuing my passions and hobbies. Okay, I get fulfillment there. Now I've got my business, my personal life, my family life fulfilled, and something was still missing. Yeah. Right. And that's where, when I started helping other entrepreneurs and largely like contributing through sort of the charity work that I'm doing, I felt more well-rounded from that fulfillment perspective. Right now, I don't feel like there's a lot missing. I feel like I wish I could do more, but I don't feel like there's the buckets of things that I'm doing are I had the right buckets.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I feel like we could keep going on and on, but let's dive into our monumental questions. What does success mean to you?
What does success mean to me? Well, let's see. I mean, really, it's funny. I think a perfect segue to what we just talked about with the buckets. It's really fulfilling. It's filling those buckets for me, right? My family, my kids, my wife, my parents, myself, my professional life, and how I'm impacting the world. Am I doing something in each of these categories? And if I am, like, have I done something that's going to leave an impression? Have I made a change to someone's life? Have I impacted someone in a positive way? That's, to me, is sort of success. I'm on the path, and I think I'll always be on the path until I die. I don't think success is one of those things where I'm going to say check.
Yeah.
But I think it's a journey.
Yeah, I love that. What about daily habits or morning rituals that you have?
Sure. So I'm very much a I've tried a lot of different things. For me, in terms of my personal life, daily rituals and processes, it's really, I feel like it comes down to diet, sleep, exercise, and those essentially. So number one, I try to optimize my sleep as much as possible. I've got an Aura ring, thanks courtesy of our Infinite 8 mastermind.
Yes.
I've got an incredible, like, this smart bed that basically optimizes the temperature. So I sleep like incredibly.
Wow.
I get up in the morning and I have my sort of morning meditation. I do this breathing exercise by Wim Hof. I started it a couple of weeks ago. I've been doing that. I do my X3 bar workout. And then I have a good routine around basically sort of morning diet before I start work. Now, having said all of that, there's weeks where I'm on it and there's weeks that I'm not on it. I can definitely I have room for improvement in that section, but I know the things I need to do, and I try to do them most of the time.
Yeah, I love it. What about favorite book or book you're currently reading?
Okay, I think I mentioned it to you, but I'm reading this book, Eat People, by Andy Kessler. It's the Unapologetic Rules for Game-Changing Entrepreneurs. It's 12 rules for entrepreneurship that I think really resonated. He talks about a lot of different stuff. Basically, it's about it's about entrepreneurship and sort of focusing on the right sort of business models, as opposed to smaller sort of incremental business models, really looking at how the model that you choose, the business that you choose to get involved in, can make a large societal impact. The author talks about in his book, going on a trip to France with his wife. And they like to do odd, peculiar things. So he's like, he went to some museum in this rich guy's home, right? Rich from like the 18th century or something like that. And he's like, as we were walking around, it was incredible home, right? And he jokes to his wife and he says, hey, I wouldn't trade my life today for this guy. And he was probably a billionaire of his time. Right. And she's like, why would you not? I mean, look, he had an incredible life. Well, he doesn't have a big screen TV. He doesn't have an iPad. I don't see any of these things around the house. Like, he can't play on his Xbox. So it's like these things that we take for granted today, there's things that, these founders have created that society can't go backwards. Yeah. And this person may have been rich beyond his wildest dreams, but no matter how much money he had, he couldn't have a phone that could tell you, look up anything in the world, right? Like,
at your
you
fingertips.
can't go back from that. So it's like the people that create those technologies should be rightfully rewarded, right? So it's like, how can you find those opportunities? How can you make an impact in society that cannot be done?
Yeah, I love that. And we talked about right before we jumped on, it's, that's a real example of like, how can we all make our own version of a monumental impact in the world? So we make that transformational shift instead of just an incremental one.
That's right. So I'm really enjoying this book. I'm almost done with it, but it's got some really good nuggets of information.
I love it. Well, I'm adding that to my list. Eating People, everybody, look it up, try it out. People. Oh, Eat People, Eat People. I love the title. Well, Abhi, I feel like we could keep going on and on. Also, I love this episode. Massive, massive value. I loved hearing your story, all the different companies, what you learned, your biggest limiting belief in getting through that, and also what you've learned coaching and advising others. So really, really phenomenal value. I appreciate you coming on today. And then how can our Monumental listeners follow you or reach out to you or connect with you?
Sure. So I'm not huge on social media, but the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. Just search for Abhi Goel. Maybe you can put a link in your podcast or something like that. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm happy to always chat and hear ideas and brainstorm or whatever with people. So, reach out to me if you got any thoughts or if you have any questions.
I love it, guys. Take Abhi up on that. We'll put a link to his LinkedIn in the show notes. And if you all enjoyed today's episode, make sure to go on social media, go on LinkedIn especially, because that's where Abhi's at, and share this episode. Let him know you're listening. Let me know you're listening. Tag both of us. And also do not forget, really help share and grow the Monumental community by liking, subscribing, rating, and reviewing the podcast wherever you're listening, iTunes or whatever other platform. And guys, with that, have a monumental day.